Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to Tactics Board. The Championship season didn't get off to the perfect start at all for Norwich City, but there is a more positive feeling for the Canaries going into this weekend's trip to Fratton Park to take on Portsmouth in their second league game of the season after a 2-1 win over Watford in the Carabao Cup. And here on Tactics Board today, I'm going to give you my predicted 11 for that game. We're going to delve a little bit into Portsmouth's tactics and how they'll sort of match up with Norwich's and see how the game is likely to pan out on a tactical level. And then I'm going to come on to quite how we figure out this quite complex City system that worked quite well for Liam Manning in that Watford game. But we're going to begin with the starting 11s. So without further ado, here's the team I think Manning will pick for the trip to face Portsmouth. So I've gone for Vladan Kovacevic in goal, Jakov Medic, Harry Darling and Ben Krezene in a sort of flexible back three with Jack Stacey at right wing back, Papa Amadou Diallo at left wing back, Mirko Topic and Jacob Wright in the centre of midfield with Matthias Kvistgården and Ante Sienats flanking Josh Sargent in a front three up front. Now, a few changes there from the Millwall game, not a totally drastic departure from what they did, but I've gone for mainly a sort of slightly differently constructed left-hand side, and we'll get into why it looked so different against Watford and why tactically its application is quite different to the three that it was against Millwall, which was Jose Cordoba in a left centre-back role with Jeffrey Schlupp in that sort of wing-back position. But I also think there are basically sort of individual performances that will be contributing to that. I think Ben Krezene actually has been very good whenever he's been asked to play that sort of hybrid centre-back, left-back role. I think most of us would have had him down as a sort of wing-back if you asked how he fitted into Manning's system, especially if you said a 3-4-3 when he arrived at Norwich. But he's actually filled in quite well defensively. He gets to play more of that sort of traditional left-back role, I think, when he's in that role, particularly offensively. If Norwich are on the front foot, they're dominating the game a lot, as they did against Watford. That allows Diallo to basically go on and be a full-on winger, and then Ben Krezene sort of backs him up as a wide left-back rather than just someone in that centre-back role. But in possession, being a little bit more central rather than having the pressure of being on the touchline while you're being pressed by the opposition, I think gives Krezene a little bit more time on the ball. And from what I've seen of that so far, I think that really suits him. I think he's been really good. And I have to say that duo of Diallo and Krezene on the left-hand side has worked so well both in that Watford game and in the final friendly of pre-season against NAC Breda that I'd be surprised if it's too long before we see that in the Championship. So that's what I've predicted on that side. In midfield, there was a bit of a decision to make as well, because I thought Marcelino Nunez was very impressive actually at Vicarage Road. Obviously scored the goal maybe slightly fortuitously thanks to a goalkeeping error, but I thought he highlighted why he can be such a big asset at times for Norwich. Got praise from Liam Manning in his pre-match press conference as well. But I just think you look at Manning's preferences over pre-season and in the first game of the league season, the fact that Jacob Wright and Topic both played 45 minutes against Watford, and it does still feel like they're fairly solid as the midfield two that Manning wants going forward. I wouldn't be completely shocked to throw Nunez in there, and if I was Manning personally, I would certainly be considering having him in my midfield too. But just from what we can see of his midfield preferences so far, the fact that I think going to Fratton Park is going to be difficult as well, and Norwich will probably need those slightly more physical profiles in midfield, I'm just about going for Topic and Wright in that midfield too. And then the front three I think will be really interesting, because obviously Amankwa Forson out for a few months, as Manning put it, with a hamstring injury. So there is a place to be filled there after he started in the Millwall game. Both Kvistgården and Sienats are fit and ready to go based on his press conference. They both trained despite the fact that Kvistgården missed the Watford game with illness and Sienats was rested from it. So they are both available. I think everyone's seen what Kvistgården can offer to the team, even if maybe not quite in a sort of in a normal role. I think it was quite chaotic by the time he was introduced against Millwall and got sort of 20, 30 minutes, but he showed that he's got that desire to change games, that ability to get on the front foot. And I think in that sort of left-sided number 10 role, he could really thrive. I think Ante Cianats wasn't really at his best against Millwall. A few mistakes on the ball, wasn't really that involved. But based on what we saw in pre-season, you back him to turn that around. And I think actually, although it's a very, very attacking front three, and they will probably have to do more defensive work than maybe you'd associate with three players who have all at various points in their careers been tipped as number 9s at their best. I think that is a very exciting one, and if Norwich want to be on the front foot, that's the sort of front three that I think fans will want to see. Although my only reservation is whether, if you have Chris Goran on the left-hand side with Diallo behind him, traditionally a winger playing as a wing-back, and then a left-back playing as a sort of left-sided centre-back behind them, that does feel like quite a vulnerable side defensively. But I've just about gone for those players because I think you look at the transfer outlay, how warmly they've been spoken about, and the impressions they've made at various points over the last few weeks. It feels like it would be tough to leave any of them on the bench, really. So, I'd be fascinated if that is the team, whichever it is. I think it will probably be different from Millwall after that performance on the opening day, and I'm very interested to see what it is when it drops at 11:30 tomorrow. On to Portsmouth then, and although it can be hard to work out from week to week what each different Championship side looks like tactically, particularly at this stage of the season when there isn't a huge body of evidence, obviously with the squad as it is, I think you look at the way that their stats shaped up, in particular last season, the way that John Mousinho used his players upon their return to the Championship, and it's quite easy to predict and work out what sort of side they are in terms of in possession. They were right towards the bottom of all the stats that really indicate possession-based play. They didn't play many short passes. They played some of the highest number of direct passes in the Championship last season. They didn't put many passes together in each of their attacks, and that tells you all of that they do want to be really direct as soon as they get the ball, whether it's from a high press, which is another key feature of their system, or even from a goal kick. They want to get the ball into dangerous areas as quickly as possible. They want to get it forward, find some of their more physical presences in midfield or up front, and try to create danger that way. Obviously, one of the major benefits of that is that you don't really have the risk involved with playing out from the back or with short passing. You don't leave yourself exposed by sort of intricately detailing your in-possession work, because they go so quickly from a defensive structure to an attacking one that it's quite easy then to sort of close up if you lose the ball quickly. But also you do risk possession a lot, and it can be quite frustrating to watch that kind of football. You'll give away a lot of balls, and with the likes of Harry Darling and Jakov Medic at the back, Fratton Park, who likes to sweep up when the ball goes over those defenders' heads, you'd like to think that Norwich will be equipped to deal with those long balls and to try to basically dominate the game by getting possession from Portsmouth so often. But also they are really good at pressing, as I mentioned. That's another key sort of takeaway when you look at their stats last season, was that they were really good at doing that. They were really committed to doing that, and they were effective at taking the ball in the final third and creating chances in that way. And that's definitely something that Norwich need to be wary of. I think one advantage they've got this season on that front compared to last season is that they don't have that predictability. They are more willing to go direct and go in behind, and with Josh Sargent fit, as he wasn't for the Fratton Park game last season, they've got the ability to hit those balls long and actually still provide a threat, whereas last season it was Ashley Barnes, who will do okay at sort of pinning defenders and holding the ball up and things like that, but you're never really going to get him spinning a defender, beating them for pace and getting in behind that way. So I think the fact that Norwich have that variety means they could create chances without jeopardising themselves at the back and without taking those risks in possession, but also just the psychological and tactical fact that Portsmouth know Norwich can go long means they won't be able to just completely high press the whole time. I think that's actually a really interesting takeaway from what Manning said of what he made of Norwich last season when he went up against them with Bristol City, was that he felt his side could go and press as high and as aggressive as they liked every time, because they knew Norwich were never really going to go long. Whereas Portsmouth can't do that. They can't overcommit themselves because they will feel that, Norwich are one pass away, or, a couple of passes away from getting the best striker in the Championship in behind. So that variety, I think, really shows itself as a strength when you consider what Portsmouth can do, but it is still that intense atmosphere. The fans are close to the pitch. It's a lot to deal with. And when you consider that style of play as well, Norwich will have to be really mentally and tactically resilient for this one. Just finally then, I kind of wanted to touch on this sort of back four, back three, back five hybrid that Norwich are playing at the moment, and discuss a little bit how it works, because I actually didn't really know how to set up the team when I created that graphic that you saw earlier on, when I sort of spoke about the team that I think Manning will choose, because obviously there is a very loose base formation, but I'm not sure I've seen many teams where it's so often changed and so clearly flexible. It looks like a 4-4-2 a lot of the time. Sometimes it looks like a sort of 4-2-3-1, a 4-3-3, a 3-4-3, a 5-2-3 at times, and even a 5-4-1 when Norwich are really, really deep. So I just wanted to quickly sort of talk through some of the patterns of play and how they affect the formation that Norwich are sort of in. So if they can press high, then often they will send one of their wing-backs forward. So say the ball is on the left-hand side of the Portsmouth defence with the Portsmouth left-back or the left centre-back, then the forwards will push on, the midfielders will press high, and Jack Stacey, for example, if he's in that right wing-back role, will then push on and almost join the strikers in his positioning. He'll be really, really aggressive. But then to kind of make up for that and make sure that Norwich do still have a kind of solid back four, you'll have all of the centre-backs shuffling over, and then say Papa Amadou Diallo is playing that left wing-back role, he'll drop slightly, so he sort of represents the left-back role in a back four. One of the central midfielders will shuffle over to the left, and it will look more like a sort of 4-4-2 with Jack Stacey as a right winger, and then let's say Mirko Topic as the sort of left winger or left midfielder, and Diallo in there as the left-back. Vice versa, if the ball is on the right side of the Portsmouth defence, then Diallo will push high, and it will be Jack Stacey who drops in to sort of be the right back. But that's not necessarily what they do the whole time the opposition has the ball. That's only really if they feel they have the chance of winning the ball high up and pressing high and forcing errors maybe sometimes in that sense. So there's kind of a balance there with what they do against Portsmouth, because obviously you can put in all of that energy, you can take all of that risk of shifting formation, and say Diallo can do all of that sprinting, and then the right centre-back can just launch it forward for Portsmouth, and all of that is undone, and you're in a similar position to what you were before. So maybe what we'll see more of is that traditional back five that I think there has been when Norwich have been in sort of rested defence. So when they're deep in their own half and they're kind of trying to defend against sustained possession, or the opposition maybe have a free kick in the Norwich half or deep in their own half, when they can't really launch it into the box, but they are pretty comfortable. That's when Norwich will drop into a sort of, looks like a 5-2-3, where Sargent will press ahead of his two colleagues. They'll still press quite high, but then the midfielders will be quite deep, and the five will be even deeper than that. So what that does is it limits the chances, to be honest, of Norwich winning the ball high up in the pitch, but it means there aren't really any gaps that you leave. So if you try to press in that scenario, you can't cover all the space, and you're left with a back three. That's where there would be lots of space. And actually we saw that with Millwall's second goal. Jack Stacey tries to press pretty high up the pitch, and then Jakov Medic is left in the channel with a fresh Macaulay Langstaff as a substitute, and he's just left behind for pace to go and finish that off. So that's how you can be left exposed, and that's, I'm sure, how Portsmouth will try to expose Norwich at times. But those are sort of just some of the patterns that Norwich go through in those different situations. I do find it interesting the way that Manning talks about it, because I kind of tried to get him to explain that tactical system yesterday in his pre-match press conference, and he basically said there's not as much focus on necessarily the formation or the base setup in that sense. It's about getting players in their best position. So clearly what he sees in that set of players is the ability to play the roles that they play. So if they are going to go with that sort of back three, back four, really clear hybrid, that's where you'd say having someone like Ben Crozene or Papa Amadou Diallo would be really important, because ultimately in Manning's philosophy, it is about getting the appropriate players in the appropriate positions for all of those. So basically what I'm trying to say is all of this is very fluid, as much as all, modern football tactics and their complexity is flexible, and you can't really ever say that one base formation defines everything that a team does. It's very hard to do for Norwich at the moment. So all of our starting 11 graphics and everything we're producing at the moment is kind of subject to change at the moment, but that kind of underlines the flexibility that Manning brings to the group, and I'm sure we'll see how successful that can be against Portsmouth, and a side who probably look a little bit different to what Norwich have faced so far. So it should be a very interesting matchup. Of course, we'll have all of it covered on our channel, so go to pinkun.com/subscribe if you haven't already. Thank you very much for joining me on Tactics Board, and I'll see you again next week.